Please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Lisa Mateo.
To have all these smiling faces here today. I have to say it's extra special. When I looked ahead of time and I looked at the forecast, it was straight sunshine right across the board. Bonus, extra bonus. So thank you, San Francisco. Welcome to Bloomberg's The Future Investor Data-Powered Transformations. Now, for those of you here in sunny San Francisco, thank you so much for having us here for today. Welcome. For those of you watching from the live stream, welcome to. We're excited to have everyone here. This is a time of increasing use of artificial intelligence, increasing use of data, advanced analytics. So it's safe to say you really need to know how all this technology is being used. Well, we're going to help you with that today. We'll talk about how data is being used across the financial landscape, how it's shaping different behaviors, how it's helping different business leaders start to embrace it, start to change up their strategies, their organizations, and also how it's going to help unlock that shareholder value. So we'll talk about a few things for today. One of them is how businesses are starting to leverage that data to improve their customer service, to improve their business. We'll talk about how AI, yes, artificial intelligence, is being used to help aggregate that data. But there's a lot more in store for you today, so stay tuned. We have a lot of interesting panels. Before we get to that, we have a few announcements. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Invesco QQQ. Without them, all of these conversations that we're going to have here for today would not be possible. We'll also be hearing from them later on today in this panel, so be sure to stay tuned for that and listen to all that they have to say. Also, I want to thank you two, our audience, for being here for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them, okay? There's a certain way to do it, though. We're not doing the raising the hands and going around with the microphone. We have it much easier for you. All you have to do is scan the QR code. You have them along your tables. Okay, it's on the screen. It'll be on the screen for you as well. All you have to do is scan that, put in your question, and we will try our very best to get that answered for you across our panels for today. Also, if anyone is on social media, yes, I know a lot of you are on social media, please use the hashtag #TheFutureInvestor. Be sure to do that as well. And follow us over at Bloomberg Live. We'll do a couple of highlights that'll go throughout the program as well. And if you post anything, any pictures with someone you met here, if you're taking a selfie, just posting some information, maybe some insight that you learned for today that you want to get out to the masses, hashtag #TheFutureInvestor, and also tag us at Bloomberg Live. All right, we are about to get things started. I'd like to introduce our first panel for today. This is a group of executives. They're going to talk about their experiences, their insight. They're going to give you some examples on how they're leveraging data to help transform their customer experience, to help grow their business. So please welcome to the stage Sharu Jain of Alaska Airlines, Andrew Reiskin with MasterCard, and Fiona Tan from Wayfair. No particular order. All right. Thank you guys for coming here. We're talking about customer service is huge for a lot of your different organizations, and how data is playing a major role. So I want to set the stage for everyone here and talk about how you're using data to help with that customer experience and even beyond that. So Fiona, I want to start with you. You had mentioned earlier there's different customer data and then there's company data. So explain the difference in what you're using over at Wayfair.
Yes. So as you know, Wayfair, we're a digitally native e-commerce. We sell furniture, home goods mostly. And so there are different ways that we use data to solve for our customer experience. So one of the things about shopping for the home category, hopefully some of you have been on our site, but it is one where the customer doesn't always know what they want to look for, right? So it's not like shopping for 6-pack AA batteries. It's pretty clear, Duracell, whatever. You can very clearly articulate what you want. When you're shopping for home goods, it's a lot harder. A green couch, so many green couches, etc. So for us, we use a lot of the data that we've collected about our customers in aggregate as well as individually for each customer to help us understand what the customer means when they see green couch, because I know, what have they shopped for before. I can kind of glean the style preferences, the maybe the price points, etc. Right? So it's really, how do I use that in addition to sort of your semantic search? Right? We've been built on top of BERT's LLMs for quite some time. How do I marry that data together to give you a really personalized experience based on sort of like the aggregate and individual data that we have? I think the other part too, you mentioned around, it's sort of company data, but it's also, for example, our product data, right? So everything that we get from our suppliers about the items that are in our catalog, again, same thing, right? That's where we need to sort of extract out as much understanding as we can from it. And at the end of the day, it's that matchmaking process between a customer that isn't always that articulate about what they want to product that, again, when you get it from suppliers, they may not also be as articulate as you would like them to be about their product. So it's like, how do you enrich both sides? And there's a lot of AI that's powering the data that we have around enriching, augmenting, and then you do this matchmaking. You do all that, hopefully, to find your green couch. After all that. Right?
After all that. And we'll get to the AI too in just a bit. Shara, you talked about 3 areas. You spoke about operations, revenue, and the customer. So break all those down for us.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here. So at Alaska Airlines, we have a lot of data. So we have a lot of data around revenue, meaning which flights, where are we making money, what fares, and those change over time. So how do we sell the right product at the right time and don't run out of seats at the end when somebody might want to buy them? And then we have a lot of operations data. So we have about 1,300 flights a day. Each of them take about 50 minutes to turn. And we collect about 70 points of data during that 50 minutes to really be able to tell, is the flight going to leave on time or what the challenges are. But the most important is customer data. So what do our customers prefer? What has their experience been? And so, Fiona talked about a lot of the digital customer experience. Obviously, we're using your preferences to make sure we're serving you, what you want to buy. But for us, for Alaska Airlines, care is at the heart of everything we do. And so our employees are incredible. They're sort of the secret sauce. So how do we enable them to be even, do a better job than they do today? And so we've taken, we've married our operations and customer data. So there were 2 challenges in doing this. First was we knew a flight was delayed, but we wouldn't know that the 200 people on that flight were delayed, right? Because that was separate data. So we merged the 2. So now if a flight is delayed or canceled, we know that all the people in that flight were delayed. The second was the touch points with our employees. So you may book your flight online, and then you may call reservations and have a conversation with them. And then you walk in and you check in and you may talk to a customer service agent. And then on the flight, you talk to a flight attendant. So how do they know you? How do they know you're the same person? So we're putting that experience of, what's happened with you, what your experience has been with us in the hands of our employees. So on a flight, our flight attendants are able to see, what's your mood, right? How do you feel about Alaska Airlines? Because you've been canceled or you've been delayed or your bags have been lost. And they're able to then approach you and say, I'm sorry this happened, what can I do? Or whatever way they figure out to do service recovery. And it's pretty remarkable because it could be 2 weeks after your flight that somebody comes up to you on the next flight, somebody that wasn't on your flight and knows that about you. So it's really giving them the tools to personalize that customer experience. So you feel like you're known, like we know you, versus you're just another person on the flight.
Andrew, you have a little bit of a different experience from the other 2 companies. You said that data provides insight to your customers about their customer. Explain that.
Sure. So most of you, many of you, I should say, have MasterCard branded cards in your wallet, but MasterCard's not the issuer of them. You instead bank with the likes of Citibank, Bank of America, Cap One. They're the ones who actually do the underwriting and assume the risk for the credit. But MasterCard provides the connectivity for them so that it works at a merchant. And we provide a lot of services to make sure that it's safe and secure, because we want to make sure that it is safe and secure for you as a consumer, that you don't experience fraud. And we've all, I'm sure, experienced fraud and gotten those lovely notices over the years. So the data we have is that transactional data asset. Doesn't include anybody's actual name or address in that data. Instead, it's where you shopped, the amount you shopped. And so we use that data, first and foremost, to make sure our bank's customers, our financial institution customers, their people are safe and secure. We want to make sure that the banks understand, hey, this looks like a fraudulent transaction, or, hey, I just went on a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Paris, wedding anniversary. I want to make sure my card works so that I can go to the fancy restaurant and go to all those experiences. So we want it to work and not show up as fraud. So that's a great customer experience that we should make sure that happens, because I'm sure we've all been in situations where the card gets declined, and it's a really bad feeling. You're kind of embarrassed. It makes you feel like the criminal. So I would say that is a very important thing we provide as a service to our customers. Another big service we provide are personalization services. So we actually are one of the biggest loyalty program providers in the country, as well as we have services that provide, within digital context, personalization. So I get a sense of what do customer segments look like. Do people who go shopping in this one type of merchant in this one location also go shopping at another? So I can help our merchant partners with their business problems and say, here are some suggestions for you to do. Here are some offers that we've seen work in other contexts that increase spend. So those are typical examples of how we use data. We always have to make sure we're actually using it for the benefit of the individual. We make a promise, we have it stated publicly, that we are going to only use the data for the benefit of the individual. So that's where we think of these things to say, how are we helping the person? We're providing personalized services. We're making sure they're safe and secure.
Now, I want to play off with you the next question, since it goes along what you're saying. With large amounts of data, you get more challenges. So how are you using AI to help with those challenges? Because you said something interesting. You said MasterCard's using AI to improve the data. You put it in those words specifically. Sure.
So many of you are probably aware the number of places where you can use cards has increased exponentially over the last couple of years. Right? There's now touchless commerce in many cases. 10 years to 15 years ago, there wasn't e-commerce, right? And so our network enabled the e-commerce. And so there are all these new acceptance locations. They all now have data points in the sense of you can now sign up through a lot of these online marketplaces and sign up as a merchant to sell something in probably about 5-10 minutes. And so we're always having to keep on top of it. So you as a consumer, when you get that card statement, you go, where did I spend $50? What was this? I'm sure we've all experienced that, right? And so that's a huge amount of data we're constantly collecting, and the data quality issue keeps getting more challenging. So we're using AI to stay on top of it, and we're constantly changing the AI that we're using. So as we move from the world of machine learning and what we learned today to move on to generative AI, because generative AI can understand Andrew's Pizza Shop in plain English, as opposed to old-style machine learning, maybe not, right? Especially when it was concatenated to PZA. And so in many of those cases, we are using AI to improve the quality of that data to make it more usable by our customers and better experience for consumers.
Fiona, how is Wayfair using AI to kind of help with those large amounts of data?
Yeah, so one of the problems that we have at Wayfair is, having grown up digitally native, but in an era where it was very database-centric, is we have a lot of data that is locked up in sort of multi-user databases that are very tightly coupled to our application systems. And for those of you that have that problem, it's an awful thing to go after because the databases are not well documented. Most of the people have since left. The schemas are just all over. It's a mess, right? So one of the things we've actually been able to do is actually we work pretty closely with Google on this. But if you think about it, the way that you would describe a database and the schema, et cetera, I mean, a lot of it is sort of very language-like, or SQL is, again, very language-like. So we've actually used some of the generative AI capabilities and trained it on the databases, these large databases that we have, and we've been able to get sort of the documentation almost of the databases, and then we've been able to sort of take that whole legacy database to sort of cloud native, more cloud native database process, and really use generative AI to kind of power the whole thing. So that's been something that we've been really excited about because otherwise it would have taken us a lot longer to do. In the normal autonomous ways that you could do it, there was really, again, the understanding of the database was something that we were able to do a lot better once we had the generative AI capabilities. And as the token windows get larger, it gets better and better for us to be able to get that understanding. So that's been a pretty big key for us.
And Chabra, you had mentioned that Alaska Airlines recently added some Gen AI capabilities as well.
Yes, so we have lots and lots of data. And, an example I'll give you is when you're looking to fly somewhere. So today we engage with our guests more when you've decided, oh, I want to go somewhere. This is the time frame. I'm just looking for the best flight. So how do we start engaging with you more upper funnel and to the left, and really when you're thinking about travel or inspire you and spark that interest of travel with you. So we've launched Gen AI capability recently that you're very easily able to, ask for, okay, where can I go in the summertime to do a amusement park, or I want to go to the warm beach for family of four for under $500, right? So it's going to come back and give you options, and you can then look at why are these options served to me, and then you can go right away and book. So what we've seen is when guests come to our website, they usually about 16 to 17 times go back and forth or come back because they're still investigating. So we're really looking for how does that cut down your time to say there's almost like a personal assistant who's looking at all of that data for you and then offering you the best option for you and giving you options to go from, and then you can refine from there. So again, that saves time for you, and it'll result in better conversion, faster conversion for us.
You said, because this ties into our next question about the return on investment. So you're investing in in AI, which is, everyone knows is an investment. It's not cheap, but how do you get the best bang for your buck out of it? It leads me to one of the questions from our audience. It was from Charles Schwab. They want to know, how can you ensure that it's utilized in a way that promotes growth? So along those lines, and what you were just talking about, Charu, do you see that more people are booking because it's easier for them? What kind of return are you seeing?
Yeah, no, that's the hypothesis. And, the traditional AI and even Gen AI, a lot of efficiency and productivity use cases are being talked about in terms of supporting customer service or, getting insights out of large amounts of data, or being able to, coding is one that everybody talks about, software engineering. But this particular case, the hypothesis is it saves you time and it'll increase revenue. So we've launched it very recently, and we're watching it. We have a little bit of traffic going into this, but we have the hypothesis that it will drive revenue and growth for the company and also help our guests. So at the end of it, it's all about, if we don't help you, you're not going to book there. So.
And Fiona, for Wayfair, is it more productivity, efficiency, or how are you seeing a return on the investment?
Yeah, very, very similar to what Charu was saying. Certainly, those are your two use cases, right? One around like how can you supercharge your organization, whether it's coding, customer service, obviously, and some of the other areas. We've also found some of the other sort of non-tech areas are really very, very well suited to generative AI. So I think our legal team's been using it quite a bit, finance, accounting, and actually there's some interesting use cases that you can get out of it. The other part is really, what can you do with the customer experience that really changes, that is game changing, given these capabilities. And so I think similar to what you were trialing, we have a trial product as well that's off the main site for now, but it's called Decorify. But basically what you can do there is you can upload a picture of a room in your house, your living room or your dining room, etc. And then what it'll do is it'll use generative AI. In this case, it's generative imagery, so it's like text to image generation. And what it can do is it can take the furniture you currently have in your room out and actually replace it with generated settings, like furniture, depending on, and it'll do it in like 8 different styles, right? Because there are so many styles out there, apparently, that Hollywood glam, I mean, that is a style.
That's a style.
And so then you can you can envision your room in this generated world, in this generated, but it's still your room, generated pieces of furniture. And then what we have is we do a match from what's generated to what we have in our catalog. So then if you say, hey, look, I actually really like Hollywood glam, and I can show you the items in my catalog that match what you're seeing, and then that's where, you can then go, when you click on that, it goes into the Wayfair website, you can purchase it. So what we're finding is that, folks that are actually coming to Decorify are converting better. I think partly it's just being able to imagine, right? I think that's a part that's really neat about this, is you can see your own room in a bunch of different styles, and you can see the real world products that you can buy that match that. And it's been it's been a nice. It still it still hallucinates some, so we don't have it yet on our main site. We're trying to figure out how to make sure that it gets to a point where we feel like it's good to incorporate into the experience, but it's coming. I mean, that's the thing. That's the tech and tech's changing and improving so quickly that I think those are things we need to look up.
By the way, I'm going to thank you when my daughter comes to me and takes a picture of a room and has a list of things.
Done in like Barbie style too.
Barbie style, thank you. You mentioned challenges, so I want to talk about some of the challenges with Gen AI that you might see that maybe you've experienced or maybe you found an example for how to fix it. Because some people here might be saying, you know what, I want to get into AI. Tell me something. What would you warn me about, or what would you tell me some of those challenges are ahead of time? Angela, let's start with you.
Sure. So I would say, so we stood up about 5-6 years ago an AI governance group that I'm responsible for, and so we had instituted a formalized process for the data scientists to go through about evaluating the data for bias and quality, ensuring that the model was checked for bias and quality, had model monitoring. So we had that in place. And then when Gen AI like the headlines hit and everybody kept reading about the hallucination, airline tickets being offered for $1, right? Those kind of fun stories that hit the news. And everybody said, whoa, what are we doing? And we said, no, we will stand for responsible innovation. That is what we as an organization will stand for. So we're not locking down Gen AI, but we're going to do it responsibly. So we stood up a specific committee to do the reviews of any and all use cases to say, does this make sense? Because a lot of times people just try things just for the sake of trying them, when good old machine learning would have done the case. So you need to double check that's not really what's happening, and instead try to figure out where are the useful use cases, where's the data good enough to do this, and then most importantly, what are the controls? And so the controls, for the most part, I would just acknowledge at this point, is human in the loop. That nothing is going out the door before a human has reviewed it. So, for example, one of the use cases for efficiency's sake was marketing tagline creation. Okay, nobody's going to release a marketing tagline before the humans and the lawyers review it, right?
Yes.
I would say the one use case that was kind of cool that sort of relates to where Wayfair is that our team that does a lot of personalization for retailers, what they did is they would take in the retailer's product catalog, and then from one side of it, they would take the images and generate better product descriptions for them. Yep. And then similarly, from the English language text, they would take the query from a customer and turn it back into the image. And so therefore, it was a very defined set because the image had to be a product in the catalog. And so the LLM was trained that you couldn't actually do something that was a hallucination. So we had a control in place that we all said, okay, we can release this out to the wild because we had it boxed in. Mm-hmm. I will tell you, I was at an event with one of the large foundation model providers. You can imagine which one. I will leave it to your imagination. With one of their premier financial services clients, and they were touting, this is great, it's better than humans, and humans make mistakes, and these things will make mistakes. The financial services guy got up there and he said, yeah, we love using this, but I'm not stopping a human from not having it without a human in the loop at this point. The technology just isn't there quite yet. And so I would say from financial services, we are in certain ways conservative, which I think is probably a good thing for consumers. Protect your money. But therefore, as we are doing this, we are being somewhat conservative of what we're going to release and not have that human in the loop. So I would say that is just an important consideration here of when do you get to that point beyond where there's going to be a human in the loop.
And I want to expand on that human in the loop
in
just a bit, but hold tight on that thought because I like where you're going with that. Shari, you had mentioned as far as challenges when it comes to it, training the data, tweaking models, like some of these processes are a little bit time consuming. Expand on that.
Yeah, and like any consumer brand and brands like ours, that trust that we have with the guest, you don't want to break that. So it's very important. We've been doing the Gen AI work internally facing for a long time, or as long as it's come out, which is very recent. But putting it in front of the consumer has taken a while to make sure that we take care of the hallucinations and other things. So we've grounded it in our data. So the model can go and look for all of these destinations and why it's the right place. but we actually make a call to our schedule and our price before we put it in front of you. So we get away from the $1 tickets or all of those scenarios. And we've also developed something that's I'm very excited about from an innovation point of view. It weighs the responses between the human and the models, and is able to rate them and then kind of make sure that the right responses are being put forward, so we don't break that trust. But as we've been on this journey, we found there were about 7 or 8 steps that had to be taken to get to this point, starting from where should we apply this? Where's the best place to do it? All the way from then, where's the data? Do we have good data to feed into it? And then training the model, and then learning from it. And sometimes that loop between the data and training the model and going back and adding more data and training it again has been where it's been interesting, because we were talking earlier about customer support, customer assistance, marketing, software engineering. It's been relatively very, very, very easier to do. But aviation safety, right? So if you give it a lot of data about aviation safety, the model's not used to that. It takes a lot more time for it to learn the acronyms and what's really behind it to be able to make any sense of that data. So that's where we've gone back quite a few times and are now seeing some trends that in a large amount of data, it's very important to see.
And Fiona, what challenges have you seen over at Wayfair from Gen AI specifically?
Yeah, no, I think, again, as we were all talking about, you definitely still want to make sure that you have humans in the loop. So, for example, in our case, for the customer service agents, we're using it to help assist with summarizations and sort of a response generation. And even if the response quality is high, right, and we've done the tests, and a lot of times it actually does quite well from a quality perspective, we still have the agent there as the gatekeeper to ensure that it's actually correct before it goes out. I think one interesting thing that we did find, and this is going to be, I think, an ongoing sort of change management training thing that we have to do with employees as well, is that a lot of times what's generated, and again, if you generate once, twice, 3 times, for the most part, it'll keep doing it differently. And the agents are like, well, that doesn't sound like me, right? And so sometimes they actually end up spending more time editing it to make it in their voice than actually taking the factually correct generated response. So, those are things that we're learning along the way. It's even though it's correct, it's like, how do you now evaluate the quality of the responses, and maybe you say, hey, look, actually I can train it to response in, say, the Wayfair voice, and maybe that's good. We don't need to have everybody have a certain style and voice added to the response. So, this is something that we didn't have to worry about before. Now we've given this tool, and the service agents are seeing it, they like it, but at the same time they're like, well, it doesn't sound like me. So now I spend all my time making it sound like me.
And that's why you talk about, okay, so let's get to the human in the loop. So just expand on that a little bit, because sometimes people are, they worry, they hear AI, they think, oh, maybe, that's going to take my job. Or what's your take on keeping that human in the loop?
Yeah, I think the way we're thinking about it is to make the human more productive, right? And they can do more, but this will help them provide, for example, you mentioned a little bit of this as well, and we started doing it even before generative AI, but providing them all the background information about the customer, like suck it all in so that they can make better informed decisions. And now it's like you have all this data, and you're actually going to come up with the first response that's generated first, but they still have the ability to take a look at it and go, yeah, that makes sense. Or as you are having the conversation, with the customer, you have still got the leeway around, like, hey, look, I'm going to offer you X amount of refund. You can always query and say, hey, look, what's my total balance, and the LLM can help you with that, but you can still take that last decision spot, right? And I think anywhere that you find that there is more certainly risk areas is that's where you want to make sure that you have a lot of humans in the loop, or the autonomous stuff doesn't really just make it up there without some kind of human in the loop, right? So I think you have to kind of look at these scenarios where there's very, very low risk. Maybe you can do more trials with totally autonomous responses, but anything that's beyond that, you want to make sure that humans still, at least that's how we're looking at it.
Yeah. Does this resonate with you, Andrew? I mean, how do you find that right balance?
I think it's going to depend upon the product, is my take on it, and the audience, right? I would also point out, to the point where B2B2C is, in a B2B context, you could probably be a little looser in some of these things, where if you have a trusting customer, right? If the customer's our bank, then the bank's going to know, hey, there's a problem here, and they're going to call us up and say, there's a problem, please fix it. As opposed to in a consumer situation, I think it's a higher risk situation, and your risk tolerance is going to have to be a bit different. So in your customer service example, right, is if I have a customer service tool that I'm presenting to a bank, well, if there's a mistake, they're going to call me and say, hey, this isn't working. Yeah. Okay, fine, it's not a high-risk situation. But if I'm presenting airline fares, right, as I was suggesting to a consumer, you are going to be in a very different place. You're going to make sure that, no, this is exactly right. So that's where, as we are looking at this, context matters. Yeah. It really does. One of the first things we do as part of our governance program is to capture what is this use case and make sure the business has defined the use case really tightly, because otherwise you're going to be in these places where the model was trained to do one thing and now they're going to use it for something else. And as you heard in the safety example, that creates problems. And so I would say that is how we are thinking of this, that it is very context dependent.
And Charu, I know I love to speak to a human. So how are you guys keeping that human in the loop too?
Yeah, I think for us, the human in the loop is very, very important. We stand about care, and people provide that care. And that always comes first before any automation. And, you know, there's things humans do better, and there's things computers do better. So how do we automate sort of the transactional and the repetitive stuff and really have the humans offer that delight and joy and that moment of surprise so they can do their things with people who actually need help? So that's how we look at it is, you know, scanning a bag to take it in is a very repetitive transactional thing. So let's automate that part of it. But the thing of helping a family who needs help or a big group or somebody that has a question, let's make sure our people are available for that.
It frees up their time to kind of...
To really do their magic.
Do their magic,
yeah.
Exactly. We have probably like 2 minutes left. Where do you see the future of this going? I mean, Andrew, what are you excited about? What are you looking forward to as far as Gen AI is concerned?
I think it will take a lot of mundane tasks out of the hands of our employees and free up our employees to do more creative thinking. And as such, we're going to look for, I mean, one of the big things that we want out of it is not just the efficiencies that we all know that's where most of us are right now, but where are the net new products, where are the net new experiences? Because as I've seen where you can now spin up video in 2 minutes and create narrations in 30 seconds, and it could be translated into many different languages in very short time frames. You can change experiences for consumers very quickly, right? And so I can keep introducing new things to consumers, excite consumers, and I as a consumer want that. Why do I want the same static website every day, right? I instead would be fascinated if when I go to my e-commerce websites, they're giving me different experiences on a daily basis. It would make me want to go back to them more. So that's where I'm looking at it. Like there is a brave new world, and you're hearing a lot of our concerns. But I think from an experiential standpoint, as a human being, as a consumer, I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
So too, and that's kind of where you see with Decorify, like it's changing that whole experience. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you guys so much for
thank you for having us.
Thank you. One more time for our panel. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. We now want to head to our sponsor spotlight. Invesco QQQ, they're going to be showing us how they're rethinking innovation. So I want to please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Michelle Lin, Global Head of Data, Insights, and Planning, and also Paul Schroeder from Invesco. Thank you.
I'm Michelle Lin, Global Head of Data Science and Insight for the Bloomberg Media Organization, and I'm joined by Paul Schroeder, QQQ Equity Product Strategist for Invesco QQQ Sponsor Spotlight, Rethinking Innovation. Welcome, Paul. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
What's up? Okay, so as a quick reminder for everyone, can you tell us what QQQ is?
Sure. So I'm sure most people here have heard of QQQ, if not all. But QQQ is an ETF that tracks the NASDAQ 100 index. Now, the NASDAQ 100 index is comprised of the 100 largest non-financial companies that are listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange. And that index really has become one of the preeminent large cap indices in the world.
I kept looking at the client.
So it seems like the appetite for investing in innovation has grown. How has QQQ benefited from that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think especially over the last 4 years, investors are seeking out ways to access and invest in innovative companies. Really overall, though, if we take a look and think about QQQ and some of the major holdings within it, it really has held some of the most innovative companies in the world that we've seen. If we take a look and think about some of the technologies that have affected the way that we live our day-to-day and work in our day-to-day lives. For example, if we think of the rise of the internet, if we think of the dawn of social media or the pivot to smartphones, and obviously more recently the focus on artificial intelligence, QQQ companies really have been at the center or adjacent to bringing those technologies to market. And a common question that I get is why is that? Why does it seem that these QQQ companies within QQQ are positioned so well? It's because they have a high propensity to innovate. Now, really, we like to quantify innovation. Being an asset manager, we're all about the numbers and figures, right? So we really quantify innovation through 2 different metrics. The first would be how much a company is spending on research and development. And what we've seen on average is that companies within QQQ outspend companies within the S&P 500 on research and development by about 2 to 1. Now, I think the really interesting thing is if you take out the around 85 companies that are held in both from the S&P 500, that multiple goes up to 15 to 1. So the second metric that we really look at is patent activity. Through all that research and development spend, we want to see companies filing new patents for new technologies. And we've seen companies within QQQ file patents within disruptive technologies at a pretty high rate. For example, over the last year, we've seen out of all natural language processing patents filed worldwide, QQQ companies have filed about 40% of them. So obviously a very timely idea. And another way that we like to look at patents is, ways that it could be adding revenue currently in the future. We see high activity still within cloud computing, which is adding to bottom lines today. And we're obviously seeing activity within disruptive technologies that companies are hoping to add to the bottom line in years to come. So why is this ultimately important is that we believe that this propensity to innovation has really added to the fundamental growth. We've seen earnings, dividends, and revenue outpace that of the S&P 500 over 10-year periods. And really, we feel that fundamental growth obviously has led to the strong performance. Qs are coming off of its strongest calendar year last year, which it was up almost 55%. And since its inception, it's outperformed the S&P 500 by about 2% on an annualized basis. So overall, we feel that the innovation has really played a key role to that performance and the growth in the fund, which is now accounts for about 26% of all large cap growth ETF assets.
So who's driving the growth?
Yeah, so we're really seeing a lot of different types of investors use the Qs. AUM within the Qs now is around $250 billion, which makes it the 5th largest ETF in the world, but it's also the 2nd most traded ETF in the world. So it's not unusual to see 18 to 20 billion in notional value of the Qs trade on a daily basis. So really what we have seen is that the Qs have really been the growth engine of a lot of investors' portfolios as small cap has started to underperform in recent years. And we've seen larger, more sophisticated institutional investors use it over shorter time periods because of the liquidity. But what I think is most interesting is that the Qs is one of the very few ETFs that have been around as we've seen the individual investor rise to prominence. And it has played a key role along with ETFs in general in really democratizing investing.
So as one of the oldest ETFs, QQQ was really a leader in the democratization that you're mentioning.
Right. I think it has played a key role. It turned 25 in March, which we were very excited to celebrate. But if we think about where investing was 25 years ago, if an individual investor wanted to gain access to the NASDAQ 100, they would have to call their broker and place 100 trades in 100 different stocks, probably pay a very large fee to do that, or they'd purchase a mutual fund and be stuck with a single price at the end of the day. Obviously now we can place a trade on the go through a mobile app using one ticker. So things have really changed quite a bit, and obviously the Qs have been a part of that change. Overall, I think if we were to summarize the Qs, the Qs really provides a liquid, cost-effective, and tax-efficient way for investors to access a basket of companies that have changed the way we lived.
Paul, thank you so much for sharing your insights on rethinking innovation as part of the Invesco QQQ Sponsor Spotlight.
Thanks for having me.
I write about the enterprise software industry at Bloomberg, write about a lot of vendors who speak about how data and AI are rapidly being ready to change how a lot of companies function, customer experiences. Super excited today to speak with Alon Amit. He oversees data and AI at Intuit, a company known for TurboTax, also has QuickBooks, MailChimp, Credit Karma. And he's been able to implement some pretty exciting stuff already, which is really particularly interesting with a company that has grown through acquisition. We all know that leads to, or can lead to, some pretty big difficulties. And so I'm really excited to hear from you. And maybe we could start off with TurboTax, because it's tax season. I would wager over 50% of people in this room use the product, and we notice some new bells and whistles. So can you tell us a bit about how you've kind of used AI to change the experience already in that app?
Sure, thank you, and you're welcome, everyone. If you have used TurboTax in the last season, you might have noticed, I know this because I literally heard from friends coming up to me and said, hey, that was pretty cool. When people engage with the product, we're now able to offer, for example, explanations inside while you're using TurboTax and you're wondering why this happened, why that happened, why this year's return is different from last year's. We can literally offer these explanations, and they come from a generative AI model, not from a human expert. So that's one way we were able to
awesome.
Help people out.
Is something like this, is this difficult? Is it as simple as, hey, we already have this customer profile, hit it with an LLM? What's different? Was this tough to implement?
You don't really expect me to say yes, right? No, it was not easy. It was not easy. None of these things, we've heard before from Fiona and Andrew and Charu. The technology is great, but it's never the kind of thing that you just throw away the product and say, hey, go help this customer, you genius LLM, and it just works. That's never the case. In the case of tax, there's many layers of understanding the tax code and knowing why actually what just happened, and then framing it in a language that a human can understand. It takes a lot of effort, and honestly, this is just one of the ways we're leveraging the technology today. Layers starting from, you mentioned the complexity of a company that has grown through acquisition, so just having the data available to the model at the moment when it's needed, the correct data, fresh, and then understanding the environment, the world, the customer. All this knowledge takes significant effort to do.
Absolutely. And so maybe it's not surprising that AI came to the forefront of a lot of people's brain in the last year and a half due to ChatGPT, a chatbot. That has led almost every vendor to say, take a look at this chatbot we built, right? Now you can talk with the chatbot. But you're a little bit of a chatbot hater. You think that's not the right approach. Tell us about that.
We spoke before, and you did brand me a chatbot hater. So, look, there is, first of all, the whole world was exposed to the technology through ChatGPT. I'm sure many of you have seen this and have played around with it. And there was, in corporations like Intuit and many others, there was this expectation that the universe is now waiting for us to offer a chat experience to do taxes, a chat experience to book airline tickets with Alaska Airlines or what have you. Now, there are instances where customers are interested in asking questions, for sure, but if you think about the way we help small businesses in QuickBooks, it's not the right thing to do to have this experience that says, all right, good morning, small business owner, ask me anything. Because if you say ask me anything, for most people it's like, what would you like me to ask, and what can I ask, and what sort of questions would be helpful? And our internal push, the technologists inside of Intuit, our internal push for our product designers was to say, if there is something helpful we can tell the customer, let's just tell them that. Let's not wait for them to ask us a question and go, oh yeah, I can help you with that. There are many advantages to doing it this way. We can be proactive. People don't necessarily know how to engage with such a language model. And we can even spend more time thinking. If we want to offer insights every day to a small business owner, we can spend the entire night, the model can spend the entire night thinking, rather than having to respond within 5 seconds to a question that just came in. Again, many of you who've interacted with ChatGPT may have noticed it doesn't always respond immediately. It takes some time. And in the context of taxes or finance or small business, or if a MailChimp customer asks the system to generate an email campaign, it could take a lot of time. Much better if you can spend time leveraging the smarts of the language models to think about what can we do for the customer? How can we help? What insights do we see there, and what can we offer to them that they might not even have thought to ask? So, not to trash chatbots, there are instances, there are situations where people really want to come in and ask a question. That's very legitimate. But I've noticed early on myself, as we were thinking about these things, that many product designers were thinking ChatGPT as kind of the way to leverage LLMs, and that's literally not true. You can do many things with LLMs that are not conversational.
I agree. I always think it's very interesting when we get pitches from companies that show us, here's how we're implementing LLMs in kind of this non-obvious way, a way that maybe you wouldn't have imagined.
Right.
And of course, to implement any of these technologies, what you really need is clean and accessible data, which at a company of any scale can be pretty difficult. I know you've done a lot of work here with AWS, with Databricks, getting the Intuit house in order. I wonder if you can just tell us a bit about that journey, maybe some of the little tidbits you can pull out of what people should think about.
Yeah. We're lucky that we started the journey of coming to terms with our own data about 5 years ago. You may have seen our CEO, Sasan Goodarzi, was declaring Intuit an AI-driven expert platform 5 years ago. And there was a realization that to get this to happen, we really need to make sure that the data is well organized. And as many people have discussed earlier, that's never easy. It's never easy at any company. It's never easy at a large company. And it's certainly not easy at a company that grew through acquisitions and has technologies of various kinds and has just shifted to the cloud as we did 6-7 years ago. So this was a long journey. And I think a few things that I would say about this. There are some concepts out there that I would encourage people to learn about if you're curious about them. Something called the data mesh, which we were inspired by. We didn't exactly implement it this way, but it's an interesting concept. It's sort of an evolution of an earlier idea called the data lake. Many of you may have heard about a data lake, and if you talk to technologists nowadays in big companies, they would say, yes, we have a data lake, and by now it's pretty much a data swamp. That's not uncommon because the data lake was meant as this repository, like single source of truth, single repository, all the data is there, and sure, all the data is there, and I think Fiona mentioned before, there are thousands of tables and tens of thousands of databases, and nobody knows what they do, they're not described, and it's just a mess. To empower an organization to get data to a good place is not just a matter of organizing the data, it's shifting the culture. It's getting the developers, the data scientists, anyone who produces data or consumes data to understand that data is a product. People will need to use it, and to use it well, they need to understand what it is, what it does, what it does not, what are its characteristics, and who owns it. How do you even get access to it? We've had scenarios years ago when you see a table and like, oh, that's an interesting table. I would like to get access to it. You don't have access. All right, how do I get access? I don't know. You have to find who owns the table and go, Slack them and ask them for access. That's changed now, but getting that to change was a significant undertaking, just to catalog the data, have it have explicit owners, and have the owners understand that they are now stewards of that data. So I would say the journey is not merely technological. It's very much a people and process kind of thing. It's very much a culture kind of thing. But if you get to a place where people understand that, and every time an engineer develops a new product, and they know that their product generates data, and other people at the company may need this data, they cannot even necessarily imagine who they are, but it's okay. Just making sure that their own data is well built, well documented, and the technology underlying this makes it easy for them. It's not hard work. The data team inside of Intuit created the technology that made it easier for the developers, for the analysts, for the data scientists to create those things easily, document them easily, and remain stewards for a long time.
Nice. These kind of transformations, they're not cheap. Vendor costs, people costs. At the end of the day, we all have to make a slide deck to show why our work was valuable. What was the ROI you saw? How did you quantify the results here?
So obviously cannot speak numbers in our quiet period, but this transformation, again, 5 years in the making, I would argue that literally none of the innovative products that we've launched over the past 2 years could even have been possible without it. So if you look at the past results, the company is growing very well. I would argue a huge portion of that would not have been possible had we not invested in our data transformation, and later on in our AI transformation, and recently in the Gen AI transformation. We've spoken about this in the past. We've created an operating system around generative AI, literally an operating system called GenOS, so that developers can build generative AI-based applications like they do. Like people need an operating system. They don't have to reintroduce guardrails, reintroduce many features that the operating system just gives them. And again, I would argue the ROI on that was just making any of those things even possible. It would either have been completely impossible, or it would have taken 10x longer to ship any of those features. And we've shipped a bunch of cool stuff last year, and I promise we will ship more stuff in the coming years.
I'm ready for tax season next year. I'm ready to look for the new
amazing.
bells.
It's going to be amazing.
I'm sure that you got peers in similar roles. You all go out for drinks. You hear some horror stories on data transformations. What are the common mistakes you hear?
Many. So people have spoken before about the challenges of hallucinations, generative AI, sometimes not saying accurate things. And I think that's well known by now, well understood. But there are many other layers of challenges with such a technology. One of the things I've observed is, I sometimes call it, it's better not to have the data than to think you have the data, or that you think you understand the data. Like the worst thing the only thing worse than a person who doesn't have access to the right data is a person who thinks they have access to the right data. Bad documentation, stale tables, stale data is literally worse than not having data at all. When systems talk to customers, MasterCard, Alaska Airlines, when people buy airline tickets or shop at Wayfair or look at their credit card statements, if the system says, I don't have yesterday's data, then it doesn't have yesterday's data. If the system says, I have yesterday's data, but it shows something wrong, that's a lot worse. So building guardrails for that, making sure that you want fresh data, but you have to be careful that the fresh data is actually correct. Sometimes you may have to go back and correct things because you detected fraud or something else happened. So it's a difficult balance to strike, but it's very important to strike it because, again, you want to make sure you have fresh data, but it's very important that you have accurate data first and foremost. I can go on.
Absolutely. We have an audience question, which I think gets at something everyone's worried about, cybersecurity, right? How do you, when you have a vendor that comes to you, their product sounds cool, maybe it's SaaS, maybe it's a workplace application, maybe it's a new LLM, how do you sniff out what's safe? Because it's not always, right? How do you figure out which vendors are worthy of your trust, whether it's on a cyber level or just investing time and money with them?
Yeah, there are many vendors out there, and sometimes it's engineers sometimes, they read something online, they find some open source system, and they're super excited to bring it in. At a company such as Intuit, as you can imagine, and I think Andrew mentioned before, anywhere around financial, we have to be very, very careful. So some of our partners, like AWS, are the biggest and best out there. It was, of course, a process to get them in, but once they're there, we can rely on their technologies and rely also on their expertise to keep their cloud systems safe. We do work with other vendors, and we do work with open source systems, for sure. But how we work with them, we have a massive security, risk, fraud, cybersecurity organizations. We have whole processes for responsible AI and the products that we ship externally to vet them, to test them, to make sure that they are transparent, accurate, safe, private, et cetera, et cetera. So in the process of vetting vendors, this actually literally happens every week. There are companies out there who are pitching their technologies at us, and there's a first filter where you have to say, is it even worth my time to get into a POC with this person, or to even do the due diligence to see how well thought out their security processes are. But we do this every day. Like, there are many, many vendors out there with amazing technologies, and we try to be cautious about how many we bring in. You can't maintain a system that is built on like 16 different vendors to do one thing. But I think we choose well, and we have some very, very good partners in place that help us.
It's a trend I hear that more and more big companies want to standardize on a couple of trusted vendors versus, if like in the pandemic, people were signing up with 200 different SaaS tools, right? I mean, this is kind of how you're feeling.
I noticed that. I think I don't have like numbers,
Sure.
but I noticed, just like you said, that a couple of years ago, there was like almost everything like, come on, let's use it, let's do it. It's so cool. Now we ourselves, and I'm sure many others, have felt the burden of having to sustain so many different vendors, having to keep up with their changes. We like having best of breed, and luckily there are many out there. LLMs right now are proliferating all over the place. But many of these companies actually are very responsible. Some of them came from some of the biggest software houses out there, and they do a really good job at ensuring safety and security for their products. Yeah.
Intuit's more than TurboTax and the other applications you have. Do you have any other interesting, uses of AI? I heard that you've done some cool work around invoices.
We do a lot of work around automating small businesses. If you kind of take a step back and think about a small business. Small businesses are oftentimes someone's life's passion. Like, they really are interested in the small business. They're not interested in doing their books. They're not interested in copying data from one system to another. They're not interested in, they want the business to flourish. And if you look 10 years ago at a company like Intuit, the products were basically getting you through the motions, but not necessarily proactively thinking with you and how can the business do better. Even something as simple as, if you think about like sending invoice reminders, every small business needs to get paid, and it's a chore, and it's a lot of work just knowing who hasn't paid, and did I email them already, and when should I email them, and what tone of voice should I be using. Things like this can be helped with automation, can be helped with language models. Small businesses who run marketing campaigns, if any of you has a small business, if you try to do this at any scale, that's a lot of work. People spend hundreds of hours a month just typing and thinking through, like, what's my new message? How do I announce my new product? Who should I email this to, and how should I rephrase it and use the correct tone and imagery, etc. Large language models are very suited for that task. And again, as people mentioned, with human in the loop, we're not going to be sending email campaigns on your behalf without letting you see them. And people are very picky and it's very personal. So they want to make sure that the message has the right tone and has the right images, has the right colors. But we can shorten the process by like 90%. If we give them like, here are 6 creatives you can use. Do you like them? Yes. Use this one. Which audience should I use this with? I can give you a great recommendation. Does this sound right? Let's ship it out there. Saving tons of time and letting people focus on creating the next sculpture for Etsy that they're so excited to build.
Absolutely. Are there any emerging technologies you've seen recently that made you say, man, I can't wait till we can implement this into our products?
This morning? It happens a lot. people mentioned code copilots and coding, like making your internal teams more productive. Again, there's many systems out there. I happened to speak this morning with a 5-person startup that did a really amazing job at creating a coding system that is more than a code copilot, more than a software engineer's aid. It was literally like sitting on your ticketing system, and every ticket it sees that it can fix, it just fixes. So people use the product, people can build tickets, and the tickets just get eaten up. As an example, things like this happen again. I'm sure you've seen this. It's a very innovative time we're in right now. Just a matter of keeping your eyes and ears open, and that's why you're here, right? To see what's going on.
Awesome. When you got your own data house in order and you were able to implement some of these more efficient processes, was there one thing you realized you all were kind of spending the most time on that you didn't need to be?
I think earlier, I think maybe Fiona mentioned this. Just the fact that you have all this data and it's a swamp. We didn't realize just how if you look at an analyst at your company, an analyst that just needs to provide a report to their manager. If you look at their journey and how much time they're spending not producing the report, not thinking about what's the insight here, how much time are they spending looking for the data? How much time they're spending vetting the data that they're seeing? How much time they're spending literally waiting for approval to access a certain table, and after waiting for 2 weeks, they have access to the table, and it's not the table they need, and they have to start over. The amount of time people spend on this silliness is really heartbreaking when we look back, and again, we're in much better shape now, but until we looked into that, we didn't even realize how bad it was, and it was pretty bad. Again, 3 years ago, it's much better now.
Yeah, all right. Alon, Amit, thank you so much for sharing these great insights with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brody.
And next up, would love to welcome out my colleague, Diksha Shah. Diksha Gera, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Starting from recommending which next series you'll binge watch, or maybe writing these opening remarks, though I cannot confirm or deny that. But before the robots come in and take over our jobs, and they've promised to be really nice about it because they're artificially intelligent after all, let's just separate the hype from the reality. And that's what we have our esteemed panelists for here. A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for bearing through and staying through the last panel. I can dare say we saved the best for the last. So I am Diksha, and I lead fintech and payments coverage for Bloomberg Intelligence. We are the in-house research team within Bloomberg, and I'll be moderating the panel today for your good or bad luck, whichever way it goes. Please welcome our panelists, Camila Matthias Moraes, Chief Operating Officer at Brex. Sri Santanam, he's the Executive VP Analytics and AI at Experian. And Dr. Hui Wang, Senior VP of Global Analytics and Data Science at PayPal. Thank you so much for joining us. So I joined Bloomberg Intelligence in 2015, and it happened to be one of those landmark years after almost half a decade of behind-the-scenes advancements that we saw. There were a couple of nerdy factors that there was an article about it, and suddenly what people realized is that cloud computing infrastructure became very cheap. You had a lot of readily available data sets, things that were not being able to quantify earlier were being able to be created into data. And that was part of the reason why that year kind of was a very instrumental year. And neural networks went from becoming prohibitively cheap to becoming very accessible and relatively cheaper. 9 years in, and I've transitioned from covering banks to fintechs now, and alongside technology has kind of evolved, and we've come from there to here. Sri, let me start with you. We're just talking about this. How have we transitioned from the early era of AI to where we are today?
That's a really interesting question. Obviously, the topic du jour seems to be generative AI. As I think about the horizons we've been through, I think what we're seeing is something which was very valuable and very expensive has suddenly become very cheap and accessible, right? And if you look at the history of the technology, if you will, there have been 3 or 4 horizons where this has happened. The first was the personal computer. I remember my grandfather was a fantastic mathematician. He could do a bunch of arithmetic in his head, and the personal computer disrupted that. And then, of course, we saw the internet, which disrupted information exchange. It used to take a lot of time for us to get information across, and now we've disrupted information exchange with the internet. And then the third horizon, fairly recently, we've seen the last 8 or 10 years, is pattern recognition. We've seen the times when you heard the target could predict from their data how a teenager was pregnant before their family knew about it, and that was pattern recognition, right? So what are we actually seeing now? Like, what has become really cheap, or the potential to become cheap? And if you ask that question, it's quite profound. It is probably the most fundamental level cognition, like thinking, and the ability to process unstructured data. Now, what we're seeing is the early days of it, and it's very scrappy, and it kind of works in certain areas. But like when you're using generative AI with customer service agents, that's what it's doing. It's taking the initial part of taking that unstructured information and effectively automating some of that thinking, which is profound, right? So I think we're in a world right now where it's very early days, but if the promise of generative AI in fundamentally disrupting cognition plays out, its applications are tremendous. It'll start with productivity. Like in the early days of the internet, there were these internet companies, right? Like now there's no internet companies. Every damn company is an internet company.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think there's generative AI use cases now, but we'll, I think, see a more fundamental shift in how cognition embeds itself in all of our product services and starts to disrupt business models.
Well, I mean, one thing I can confirm for sure, I get a lot of questions right after results. Why is the stock behaving in the opposite direction? And when I've asked some of these questions to my counterparts on the investment industry, they're like, the reaction is completely on a different planet now, partly because of the way algorithms have been kind of running on these markets. So again, back 10 years ago, when I would ask this question about to banks about how are you using AI in your workflows or in your organizations, I think the most hilarious part is they'd say, we are using it for our chatbots. And as a banks analyst, I'd be like, how does it even matter? Like, it's not like the core function of a bank to basically be a chatbot. But I think over the years, we've seen a lot more deeper applications come through, be it in credit risk management or be it fraud mitigation or algorithmic trading, even in wealth advisory for that matter. We've gone back and forth with robo-advisors, but at least a lot more banks were now interested or willing to kind of adopt a hybrid model, if not go full robo. So from that point, and we're still talking about those use cases, right? What I wanted to understand is how, what part of your business is AI really supercharging? Like, where are you seeing the most bang for your buck? Maybe we can start with you, Hui. Is it understanding consumer behavior? Is it fraud mitigation? Is it everything? Like, where are you seeing the most bang for your buck?
Yeah. So I think as PayPal being a pioneer in this online digital payment space, cybersecurity or fraud detection is really the first use case that we are able to capitalize big time from advanced AI in terms of protecting our customers and ensure a clean ecosystem within our platform. And we've been doing that almost, again, since day one of PayPal, where it's still mostly using the more traditional statistical method. And then around the time 2009-10, we evolved into leveraging a lot of advanced AI. And of course, recent years, because of this availability of generative AI, it brings new challenge and also new opportunity for us to also continue to beef up our fraud detection capability. So this is an area, actually, again, like I said, we are capitalizing and benefiting so much from advanced AI and the latest generative AI area.
So it's interesting that you said that it's presented more challenges than opportunities. Would you say that? Like, Sri, like, talk about deep fakes, talk about the perpetrators as well have kind of advanced along the way, right? So where are you seeing more challenges and you're able to overcome those challenges with AI?
Yeah, at Experian, we've had a history of using artificial intelligence for over decades, and probably the biggest area where it's produced impact has been in fundamentally how we use our data to help our clients evaluate underwriting our customers, the core models. Historically, these models were largely basic logistic regression models, and now with machine learning and advanced AI, you're able to create a much more inclusive environment. So it's better decisions for consumers and better decisions for financial institutions. So that's an area where we see a tremendous amount of impact. I think if you look at the fundamental challenges which we see with AI and generative AI, it's really drawing that balance between innovation and what it can do and responsibly using that to drive impact with consumers. For us at Experian, we take that extremely seriously. And if you actually look at underwriting, for instance, regulation requires us to be able to explain every decision to a consumer in a very specific way. So it naturally limits how much and the sophistication of black box algorithms you can put against that.
And we will discuss some of that a little bit more in detail. I mean, just think about it, right? The previous credit decisions that a traditional bank underwrote was on the basis of financial documents that you provided them, all the official data work that you could. And a lot of people did not have official documents. They were not even legitimately employed, so to say. Access to credit has kind of been, it's come a long way with the rise of fintechs and the use of technology to kind of use alternative data sets to underwrite credit. And that obviously is a big milestone for the financial industry. But coming back to my previous chatbots example, Camilla, how is a chatbot of 10 years ago different from now? And you've done a lot of work around different applications, right? Be it internal and external users. Please talk to us about that.
No, yes, definitely. So I work at Brex, and there are two applications that I think are very interesting. One is our Brex Assistant, which is a product that we launched for the markets like last year. And one of the main things that we discussed internally is like, okay, how are we going to market this Brex Assistant if you can just go and reach out to support and you're already going to have like the normal chatbots there. But the assistant is completely different. The idea is, so one of like the most common combos at Brex is companies buy the cards plus the expense management. And one of like the challenge of having those two things is like, okay, no one likes collecting the receipts for like all the trips and like how do you get like the expense reports, all of that. So we facilitate with like taking pictures, etc. But with AI, we were able to just connect, as an example, the calendar of like each user, and like from there already like creates like the memo of like saying, hey, I'm getting an Uber for like this meeting, this external meeting with like person XYZ, and you don't need to do like anything else. From a manager capacity, the assistant allows with AI to see, okay, how many folks were actually there, what is like the budget, what is the policy for like that specific individual, and fully approve the transaction, a few things that we were not able to do in the past. So it completely went above and beyond the idea of like, hey, the chatbot is there to answer a question, but you can actually have an assistant to do things for you, and like things that were in the past like very manual and time consuming.
I'm sure that's music to a lot of folks who remembers doing their T&E and trying to figure out where the hell is that receipt. So I think I've definitely felt that benefit, like coming from there. But we promised the audience to sift the hype from the reality, so we need to get there. By the way, I'm not sure how many of you remember tracking this news piece about Amazon walkout checkout technology that there was a news article and there was some controversy around that. So basically, the company claimed that it allowed customers to bypass traditional checkouts as an achievement powered entirely by computer vision. And the technology was, in fact, backed by 1,000 people sitting in Asia. I'm not saying that. This is a news report. And there just appears to be imminent hype and almost sort of a pressure to do everything with AI. Like, how do you even decide if this problem is worth solving with AI, or is it just like a simple automation problem? So again, like, separate the hype from the reality. And this will be a quick one answer from each of you. what is the most overappreciated and underappreciated uses for AI?
If I may, I think given the past, 18 months, all this craziness around generative AI is more like a hype than like underwarm, like a reaction. So I would say some of the previous panelists talk about we are all looking at the potential in using generative AI to improve our productivity and efficiency of our workforce. So developer productivity and efficiency is one of the very big topic within that. And we've done experiment, by the way, and see very promising results. It seems like with a good co-pilot, our developer efficiency, the time it takes for them to code can be reduced by anywhere like 30+%, right?
Okay, so that's but what is the overhyped thing about AI?
But then you realize, you know what? Developer only spend a fraction of their time coding. There are a lot of time spent in understanding product requirement, coordinating across different teams, things like that. So until we can use generative AI to address every step in this process, we're not going to see 30% efficiency gain from the overall developer community. So that's really getting over the initial hype.
Sri.
Yeah, I'll switch gears now. I gave my fire and brimstone AI is going to change everything speech. If I look at generative AI, last year, for all the fun and glory, was mostly a year of POC. Most people were in POC land. And
aren't we still there?
Ish.
Okay.
I think the thing about generative AI is actually quite easy to produce something which feel like it might be a real product. And it might actually work in 1 or 2% of the cases. When you actually start taking it to production and scale, you start to see a couple of big things. Oh, I created this search chatbot which will help my customer service agents actually answer questions better. Well, how many agents are actually using it?
Absolutely.
How many agents actually go use the website instead?
Absolutely.
Right? And you actually start to see cracks, and then you get into prompt engineering, you start getting to platforms. I had this great theory of this idea which could work, and I created a prototype. I need to put it into production. I have PII data. Actually, to make it work, I need to manage regulation. Oh, by the way, because it hallucinates, it can't give advice.
Oh, yeah, all the bells and whistles. That's like the most common issue, especially with financial institutions, right?
Exactly. So I think the difference between producing a POC, which might show well, to actually driving production at scale and value makes a big difference. I think Alon talked about creating a platform or an operating system. I think that's an important part of what we've done. We've invested in creating a platform and really working through the areas where the impact is greatest. And what you need to be able to do is you do need to allow 1,000 flowers to bloom in POC land, but you need to be ruthless about nipping those flowers which don't make any sense.
Absolutely.
And actually watering those flowers which can truly go into production.
That's a very good point. So I think the AI systems are very expensive to maintain, to develop. Camilla, you're a startup. How do you decide the cost-benefit analysis for deploying AI for any of these? And also, I mean, from your client's perspective.
Yes, I actually have a very funny example that's happened very recently. Like, we were like trying to consider like, let's do like our new customer risk rating. And because we were like in the hype of AI, and okay, no, let's use like a AI model. And honestly, when I first saw that, I was like, there is no need for that. Why we are even doing like, let's just do a simple framework. And then we got like a bunch of like, I mean, it was not even like a Gen AI. It was like just machine learning. It was like this should be just a table stake checkbox. And then I think we spent like maybe 3 to 6 months to develop the model. And then once we are ready to go live, we faced like the issues with the regulators that were like, okay, how are you even doing that? So I think especially like in the tech space sometimes, and being like in the financial service, like the fintech space, you face with the hype that you have to solve all the problems with like that's sometimes very simple problems that you don't even need that, and like that will not even be acceptable in the market. So
absolutely, and I think we've noticed that across like several examples that have come out over the years. Let's talk about some of the challenges now. Like data challenges are like right at the top in that, right? Let's start with security. Third-party LLMs may actually unintentionally reveal confidential data present in your prompts or instructions, and this could lead to unauthorized access, privacy violations, cybersecurity issues. You might even be relinquishing some of your control while feeding your data into a third-party system. So what are some of the risks that you've encountered on that aspect while kind of maintaining and using large LLM models? Sri, maybe you want to kind of, and also like what are the strategies that you can use to mitigate or alleviate some of those issues?
Yeah, actually, it's a really good question. And I think at the core of it, like large language model systems are not deterministic, right? You get asked the same question, you'll get multiple different answers.
Absolutely.
And so the guardrails around these are quite important. I think in the early days of large language models, you found people saying that in order to use them for a use case, you really had to train the model, which meant that you really had to inject into the model, into the layers of the neural network itself, your data. And that posed many risks because the model could unintentionally be attacked and reveal information you wouldn't want. Since then, of course, there's a number of methods which allow for these guardrails, things like retrieval augmented generation, actually creating compound systems where your data is actually sequestered and there are specific conditions which allow data to be released. And what we have at Experian is we take this very seriously, so we actually have invested in technology to put those guardrails around our LLM systems and to ensure that there's a set of policies and procedures which manage that, which allow us to both use large language models but also allows us to use our data. One final point I'll make on this is I think the thinking on large language models has also evolved. When you looked at the early days of large language models, it was almost the notion that there would be this Lord of the Ring model which would solve everything. It would be all powerful. It would know everything. And there's GPT-5 or GPT-6 or 7 which will do that. The thinking now is shifting. And really the notion of building an ensemble of expert systems as being the solution to problems is much more seen as being much more viable and much more safe and secure. Because then you have, let's say, versus like a large language model which knows everything. If I had a specialized model which was just trained on my customer service data, then I would be much more confident about what it could say and wouldn't. And maybe I have 5 or 6 of these and I have that. So I think those techniques certainly help us get more secure and safe.
And basically put a layer of protection in between your data and the LLMs that you're using. So that is one security aspect. Also, data by itself is a challenge sometimes, right? Like not all organizations have long histories of data. There are companies who are still new, who are young companies or startups who don't have enough data. Are there any means to deal with those sparse data sets? Are there any technologies? I mean, we've talked about a lot of alternative data sets, but is there anything to kind of bypass that issue?
So I think when it comes to data challenge, I'm assuming like you will all echo, like biggest challenge we have is like there are a lot of data, but they are like everywhere. They are very distributed. And then that causes like a sparse data problem here. But you know what? If we are able to look at the whole data ecosystem together, it may not be sparse at all. It's actually it's very, very dense, right? So there is a big challenge around data is how do we make sure there's a data convergence so that, again, we can create this almost like connected network. Then the sparsity actually, like most people are connected actually, right? So you have less of that problem by itself. But then, of course, there's also governance. Like as a fintech company, we treat privacy and responsible AI front and center. How do we make sure we can apply all those governance around our data? And then in order to leverage data to deliver value, and there's a whole suite of questions around how do we discover data and how do we use the data. And there are, again, a lot of tools becoming available through generative AI to help us along those lines. So these are all kind of interesting problems around data, I guess, we need to solve. And again, in machine learning, we always say junk in, junk out, right? So we want to make sure, again, we have good data that fits into a very powerful LLM.
That's a really fascinating thought, though. And for a moment, it reminded me of once what a doctor told me. When you get hurt, like if your brain gets hurt and there's a part of the brain that stops working, there is another part of the brain that actually overcompensates and addresses those problems. It's something like that, yes, that we kind of mentioned. Sri, anything that you would share in terms of addressing sparse data or data quality issues?
Yeah, I think... I don't know who made this comment previously, which I agreed with, which it was probably Alon. actually bad data or incorrect data is a lot worse than sort of no data. I think a lot of the sparse data questions mean for us having the right guardrails on when to decide what decisions to make and when to just not make a decision. And if you look at one of the challenges with large language models, like they make up stuff, right? And so you could give it very sparse data and it'll actually like seem like very intelligent and give you information. So I think an important part of tackling the sparse data challenge, the more obvious piece, of course, is to go get the data. But I think more importantly is having the right guardrails to know the situations where you don't have enough information to make a definitive choice, and then ensure that those are appropriately compliant with your systems.
Understood. I think that's a very good segue into the other part of the problem, hallucinations, right? Precision is very important for sensitive industries like healthcare, like financials. Camilla, do you have any examples that you can share where you've run into issues with precision or hallucination, and how you've kind of mitigated some of those problems?
Yes, I think in financial service, we need to be very careful. And I would say, I think it's beyond being very careful, right? Precision is a must. People are trusting you with like their money. They need to know where the money is coming from, where the money is going, like where this transaction is going to be booked. So one of like the dream big ideas is like, what if we could just close the books for like an accountant way quicker, right? What if we could use like AI to actually, we have integrations with like ERP systems. So we have like all the transactions, all the invoices paid with like our platform. And like then we just tie and like save hours for like the accountant. But if this is not done with like perfect precision, like then you get in trouble. I mean, then you're not closing the books correctly. So what we try to do on the other end is, okay, if this is not an area where we feel that we're ready yet to add a lot of value to our customers, what are the other things that we can do? And going back to my initial example with like the Brex assistant and like having the memos auto-completed and like having like the responses that you could leverage in the platform to save time for the managers, what we do is we allow the user to see what our platform is suggesting and to select, yes, like this is exactly what's happened here. So in that way, we are not like actually helping closing the books, but we are still saving a ton of hours in like some manual tasks that is slightly different. So I think the challenge for the industry right now, while we're still improving like all the models, is like how you still be creative, because there is still like a lot of like good things that you can do, and like all of us have been playing with like Gemini like for the last months, right? So how you can still be creative and add value without compromising core data, core payments to the customer.
So I think that's a fair point. Like thinking about it from another lens of challenges, right? Like privacy. That's, in your case, it's the clients willingly providing that information. But in cases where you're actually collecting data, and I wanted to cite a recent news report that came out, cookie maker and bakery franchise Crumble is getting sued over sharing customers' financial information with their payment processor, Stripe. And Stripe had incorporated its wiretaps in Crumble's websites, allowing the processor to record mouse movements, clicks, keystrokes, IP addresses, physical location, financial location. And even though Crumble gave this information to Stripe to access and protect itself from fraudulent transactions, but it's still a very fine balance. It's a very delicate kind of nuanced way to think about this. How do you strike that balance and leverage the power of AI without really compromising on privacy for clients? Sri, do you want to kind of bring in any examples?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing is to have a clear and visible framework for how you make some of these decisions. And the challenge you often see in the situations like you talked about, if there's isn't a risk management or a governance framework, and you're largely going through processes of incremental sort of innovation, which all makes sense, but then ultimately the only way you look at the risk and management and the governance around this is when something like this happens. So I think probably the most important thing is to start with a framework which lays out a set of principles and says, this is what we're comfortable sharing and not under these circumstances.
Who decides that framework?
Well, I think anyone can, but what you actually need is to establish a governing body which actually does that. It can be a combination of technologists, product engineers, but there has to be that responsibility and accountability in creating that framework. I think Andrew spoke about the Risk Council or the AI Council that they had established, which I think is a kudos to them, I think a thoughtful step. But that simple but powerful mechanism put in place with the right folks looking through can go a long way in really managing the risk and ensuring largely that you're working in alignment with the policies that you have.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Yeah, exactly.
Like some kind of council or steering committee, like our responsible AI steering committee has people from both first line and second line, like first line data analytics AI people, as well as the first line product managers, portfolio managers. And then there is a well-established second line program. And in this like a partnership across all these teams to vet the policy and making sure we have the right policy and the right process and balance things out.
I think so. The point that I'm hearing is that we need to bring in the compliance and governance folks on the table much sooner rather than developing the product and then telling them, hey, how does it look, right? That's the point we're kind of moving towards. That's great. I think we're kind of running to the close of time. So before we end, I think let's discuss I'm not going to talk about us losing jobs from AI and like how everyone's kind of worried about. I think there is a general consensus that AI will augment our lives, the way we work, what kind of problems we kind of work on. Camilla, do you want to share a little bit more about how you're preparing your workforce to be prepared for or leverage AI to become more efficient?
And I expected a question like this. I mean, I run operations, right? Whenever you talk about AI, questions like that come around. And I actually went to check the data from my team. And one of like the main things that the team have been asking, and I'm even talking about operators, like the very first line of like defense, or even like agents, is how they can leverage AI. So I think for me what is very important is like, and maybe I'm a little bit biased because I am like in a tech company, but at least the way that people are seeing this is like, okay, how can it actually make my job better and how I can be more productive? And I even think from like the customer perspective, it's definitely different in different industries, okay? So every industry has to deal with this in different ways, but at least the way that I see is there is so much that we can gain from like business productivity by allowing and empowering like our teams to leverage AI to be more effective. And like that's the mindset that it's not only like what I try to tell them, but that's what they are seeking for. So, and like that's also like what we sell to our customers in the end of the day, right? Leveraging not only like our financial infrastructure, our software, but like even like our AI solutions to getting like the business more effective.
What are you doing with your team? How are they kind of looking at it from their day-to-day workflow?
So I think actually as an AI practitioner, this is actually a very, very exciting time for us. So I think we are at the point now that the technology is there, but it still takes people and time to make sure every part of the life and every part of the society that we can benefit from this very cool piece of technology, and our life will be dramatically different once we complete this journey. So what I told my team is really embrace it, right? So we are really lucky to be at this time, and then embrace it and then use it. And I think some of the prior panelists also comment, right? We want to get rid of all those things that can be automated so that we can all put our brain and our time in something much more interesting and generating much more valuable things for the whole world. So yeah, in general, just embrace it.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're close to the end of our session. I had a couple of more things, but we'll probably discuss that during our networking. Thank you so much. I hope this gave some food for thought on what you really want to do to embrace AI, as Dr. Hui just mentioned. But I want to leave you guys with one thought. Is Wall Street really ready for the AI revolution or for the silicon attack, so to say? And I think the other challenge is that AI isn't just automating finance. It's actually fundamentally rewiring some of those fabrics of finance at the core. And it's very possible that the next crisis will not be caused by human greed, but probably by an algorithm that we can't understand. So just give it some thought. And thank you so much for joining and staying with us till this time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, before everyone heads out, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you to our audience. Thank you for sending in your questions, for being an engaged audience. Thank you to our speakers. I saw a lot of people writing notes down, so thank you for that. I hope you take them back to your companies. But also thank you to our sponsor, Invesco QQQ. It was great having them here. If you have any questions, if you want to find out some more information, too, about them, just head over to our event website, click on that Resources tab. You can find some more information there as well. And if you want to join the next one, please, please join us. It is in Atlanta on June 11th, so you can join us there. If you want to join in the live stream, if you can't make it to Atlanta, head to BloombergLive.com. And if there's anything that you heard today that you forgot, you can go back and rewatch it too on BloombergLive.com. So thank you, enjoy, go out for some networking, some cocktails, and have a good night.